the community, in my opinion, unfortunately, has watered so down. It has watered down witchcraft. It has watered down the like community feeling. Hitting record tends to help when you film a video. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ella. Hair is looking kind of wild, I just washed it. So what is this video? So strap yourself in, it's gonna be a little bit of a serious video. It's gonna be long, I think at least. I have 1 hour and 6 minutes on my camera right now that it says that I can film. So we shall see how long this gets, but essentially this is a collaborated tag video, and anyone that wants to participate in this is more than welcome to. As a matter of fact, we would love that. It is a video that is kind of important to the community, I think. Overall, it's been kind of discussed a little bit here and there, and I think this is just gonna hopefully be an opportunity to come clean. We were thinking about what tag to use, and I kept going back to like the dramatics, like exposing witchcraft, you know, and that was shut down. It was shut down, but I'm giggling and laughing right now, but it is a serious topic, and I think having a conversation about it and being like honest and stuff is very much needed, because I think there's been a shift in the community, especially lately, and I've been part of this kind of like witchcraft community for several years at this point. I think I started with YouTube in 2018, maybe? 17? No, 16? Something along those lines. Anyhow, long enough that I've seen a little bit of a shift recently, and so this actually was kind of prompted by Joanna, the Polish witch, Polish folk witch, posting on her Instagram story a really interesting thought piece and kind of like question prompt on her stories, basically just saying, how is the community making you feel? Like all this content creation, how does that make you feel? Like late stage capitalism, how does all of this, you know, product advertising, shop, you know, shop type of stuff make you feel? Like, are you actually getting anything from the community, or are you getting like FOMO? Are you getting imposter syndrome? Like all of those type of things, right? And so then Leah, the redhead witch, and me, we were talking about that as well, kind of privately, and then we were like, we should, you know, potentially come together and like make this type of video, to make this tag. And so here we are. Now this is gonna be like super long. I already know it. I already know this is gonna be the longest video in the history of my channel. And I think that is fine. I just need you to realize that this is probably an uncomfortable conversation for some people. And I think, you know, it's not supposed to be like calling anyone out. However, I do think if this in any way kind of triggers you, or if this makes you feel a certain way, it's probably a good thing to actually reflect on that. Obviously, you're welcome to like, you know, give me feedback in so many ways too. But yeah, this is supposed to be like a discussion. This is supposed to kind of be like a back and forth, right? This is not me coming here and being like, this is how it is and these are the facts and like everyone has to like go deal with it. Not at all. These are like how I feel, how I've kind of noticed situations on social media, my general thoughts, my problems that I've kind of what am I trying to say? Kind of noticed in the community. And yeah, so I'm gonna try and like add little timestamps, so if you're like looking for a specific thing, you can go ahead and do that. And then obviously it is a tag, so we've got the tag occult tea, and you are asked, not only most welcome, but you are asked by us to participate. So anyone, I'm tagging everyone watching, go, and if you want to participate, if you've got certain things that you want to discuss within this wider sort of umbrella topic, please do so. Please go ahead. This is, I think, really necessary and really needed. And we do have like a question prompt situation going on. I'm assuming it's gonna be in the description box in some capacity. Also on Instagram, you can see the swipey thing, carousel. But yes. Also, I know it's taking ages to get into the video, but this is a no order at all. I've got my notes here, and that is literally like, there's no order of importance. There's no like, you know, I feel like it's gonna be a little bit all over the place, and that's just the way it is. Anyway, now there's just a couple of issues that I think are happening in the community. Now I'm just gonna go ahead and like kind of read a little bit of what I've got going on here. Social media and like the issue with it is it's very performative, right? So what you see online is not what is actually happening behind the scenes at all. And now I am a content creator for a couple of years now. I have a decent following, and I have kind of been around where these are just my observances, but I feel like there's this interesting expectation that of authenticity and genuineness on social media, and I agree with those. However, I think within the realm of witchcraft, this is an interesting sort of paradigm of, you want authenticity, but it's a spiritual practice, and what you see is not going to be actual filmed ritual or actual filmed whatever, right? And so what you've got is staged content. It's a performance, essentially. It's performative, it's beautifully staged, it's set in a way that it's, you know, snapshots, it's no longer than 30 seconds, especially on Instagram, with reels or pictures, you know, it's like a complete snapshot, a very staged snapshot of a piece of content, of a piece of like thing that you want to essentially post. And there's so many things that go into that, where I think people kind of forgot the reality of what witchcraft actually is like, and you see it online and that's not how it is like in reality, and you get a lot of reactions or a lot of emotions coming out of that because of how staged it is, because of how performative it is. Can you post non-staged content? I suppose you could, however, that is very, because of the nature of witchcraft being so personal, and we have very personal relationships with certain spirits, there's gonna be that sort of like, it's too private. I'm never, for example, myself, I would never post an actual spell working. I'm never gonna post an actual ritual. It's gonna be staged, because these are things that are like personal relationships with my craft, and I'm not going to present that online. I don't want to exploit my spirits for any of that. That leaves you with sometimes very beginner and shallow type of content that, again, you're just gonna have to kind of accept the fact that Instagram is such a visual platform, right? It's not an auditory platform, it's a visual platform. And so with that, obviously you've got the aesthetics going into it. And you've got this sort of like, well, it has to look a certain way. It has to, you know, like if you want to talk about any sort of topic and you want to reach people, you have to present it in a way that is digestible for people. And I kind of had this thing come up where I posted a video on Instagram that witchcraft isn't for everyone. And I stand by that. I don't think witchcraft is for everyone. I think you have to get your hands dirty, and I think if you are uncomfortable with that, you know, there's a difference between spirituality and like living in a like magical way and witchcraft. Witchcraft to me is like, you know, anyway, I'll get into that a little later. I got a lot of feedback and a lot of negative, I guess you could say, comments, because in the video I show chicken feet that I'm using for protection charm, and people were very uncomfortable with that. And it kind of was interesting because it kind of proved the point of the video, where I was kind of talking about the fact that, you know, witchcraft is going to make people uncomfortable. Sometimes people are not ready to go into more, you know, shadow work type workings, or they're not very comfortable doing spirit summonings, or just things that I think are really intrinsically linked to witchcraft. And people were upset as spaghetti about it. And that is interesting because it really felt kind of affirmative to you can't, or I can't, I sometimes feel like I cannot post something that has a little bit more meat, that has a little bit more depth to it. I feel like witchcraft on Instagram stays at this very shallow beginner level. It's very fluffy. You know, you've got kind of like everything is substituted. Like you're not gonna, most people are going to kind of shy away from using a chicken heart and they're gonna use a tomato instead. And it's like, you're kind of missing the point. You cannot substitute. Anyway, and it's like this thing where even if you wanted to be more authentic on Instagram, I think there's that like barrier that it's just not the platform for it. And so again, it's just, it has to be visual, has to be aesthetic. Instagram is like, it has to be like little chunks of like bite-sized things that are easy to kind of digest. The facts, the hot takes that you see, they're not really hot takes. They are the most common sense posts that I see all the time, but that's what does well on Instagram. And so what you get a lot of times is a little bit of a disservice to the actual community, you know, and what you also definitely then get is kind of capitalizing off of the community. Like, you've got a million courses. Everyone and their mother has a course now of like, you know, witchcraft and everything. And I'm not saying that's inherently bad, obviously. There we go again with disclaimers and nuance. But I don't know, this regurgitation of like the same thing over and over again. You don't actually get anywhere. It's not in any way depth. It's not in any way new things. And a lot of times it's just to sell you their products. And I think what also really kind of has happened is it's become such an aesthetic. It's become such a pretty thing, especially with cottagecore, and don't get me started on homesteading. And then you've got that. It's such a like devilish cycle because it's become such an aesthetic, so it's blown up. Like celebrities are now openly like into that like witchcraft kind of aesthetic, right? Big brands are doing that kind of aesthetic. Books are being published and book publishers are jumping on this topic, and everyone's just, you know, everyone thinks, especially with book publishers, that because it is in a book and because it's published, it's legit information. But let me tell you something. No one checks. No one, I mean, maybe the rare occurrence, yes. Maybe you have some peer-reviewed, like published work, especially if it's more an academic kind of book. But for the most part, the kind of witchy books that you see online, including mine, for example, right? They're not peer-reviewed, they're not corrected for information, they're not, you know, like you've got an editor come in and look at the grammar of things or look at the wording of things, but that's about it. That's the extent of it. And so you have a lot of books being published that are nonsense. There are certainly amazing books being published as well right now, but it's that thing where it's that double-edged sword, is that how you say it? Where it's a community that is really, really growing, especially since 2020. It's like had such a blow up, where you've got a lot of newcomers and you've got a lot of people now in the community that are truly amazing. And then it's also a lot of people that are not that amazing. And obviously with all of this sort of like new influx of everything, you've got everyone, you know, creating their own shops and everyone's selling something and everyone's kind of, you know, and the nature of selling stuff is obviously a lot of times kind of emotional and like fear of missing out. You've got that sort of like, you need this product. And again, it's like really heavily just capitalizing off of the community. And that's really irritating. Everyone is just selling you stuff. Everyone's just like telling you hot takes left and right. Everyone's just kind of got wanting to grow their platform. The thing that I'm seeing the most of at the moment is like, oh, my engagement is so low, my views are so low. And it's like, it's almost like the community, in my opinion, unfortunately, has watered so down. It has watered down witchcraft. It has watered down the like community feeling. My my husband and me were talking. He recently is my husband, so I keep switching back and forth with fiance. My husband and me were talking about this as well, where it's like, you know, the community appears to be, and likes to appear to be, very kind and inclusive and, you know, open. But it feels like everyone's just waiting to jump on each other and tear each other to shreds. And everyone's got a little shady tweet going on, or thread or whatever. And it's like there's no actual constructive, I don't know, it feels like there's a stagnancy. We're not actually getting anywhere. Humankind, I think, they like being looked at as like someone that has like some authority perhaps, or that seems educated or knowledgeable. And people, you know, think that being an influencer or a content creator is like such a cool thing. And what you get with that a lot of times is people that blow up a lot of times out of like sheer coincidence, or because it is a beautiful video, and that's all it takes to be on Instagram, to be honest with you. Like, everyone's always like, what's the secret to grow on Instagram? It's consistently post beautiful content. That's all it is. And make it so that it's like palpable, so that it's digestible by a lot of people. Like, don't post anything that is too opinionated. Make it nice and easy, and there you go, you've got yourself 140,000 followers. You can become an authority just because you have 140,000 followers or whatever. And it's like, no, hold on a second. And like, truly, a lot of the best creators don't have a large following. But it's just how Instagram works, and it's how social media works. And I know I'm focusing a lot on Instagram, but it's just how it works on social media in general. I think a big topic here is then, of course, with people blowing up on social media, and this is gonna potentially really ruffle some feathers. I think a lot of people don't believe what they're posting. I think they're posting. I think they like the aesthetic. I think it's just currently trendy. I think, you know, it's just currently like what's happening. And so people are, by chance or whatever, blowing up, and then they go with it. And I think they go along with what is the commonly believed thing. And they kind of go along with, well, you know, I'm in this niche, so therefore I have to, you know, like pick your little undercategory and like post about that. But I think a lot of people don't believe in the heart of hearts what they're posting. I think a lot of people post for the sake of posting. I don't think they're actually here to share perspective, share UPG, offer bites of education or anything like that. I truly see a lot of people where you can just feel, at least to me, and like there's persons that I've had interactions with that is like, you don't believe this, do you? What's the point of like being on this platform, in this community? You don't even believe it yourself. Like, you're a grifter, you're just using this community to sell your, you know, $100 like candle. This is just, I don't know, it's really frustrating because it does such a disservice to the community. It does a disservice to the people that are actually in it to learn, the people that are actually curious about this craft, because you think, oh, that person has this many followers and they're doing educational content, and then you've got people looking up to that person, or people thinking, I can learn from this person is the trustworthy source. It's like, no. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Unfortunately, it's so hard to discern nowadays who is a reliable source and who isn't. I've seen big authors be horrible sources of information, quite frankly. And that's the thing. I think a lot of times these people, they're creators. They're not actually knowledgeable, or perhaps sometimes it's also the other way around. You know, sometimes people present themselves as being more knowledgeable than they actually are. And then also you see the opposite, where people assume that you're not as knowledgeable. Again, like proper information, it's misinformation as a matter of fact, is you've got these people who then also exaggerate not only their knowledge, but they exaggerate so much more, such as their spiritual encounters, their relationships with their deities, where you then have people getting such imposter syndrome slash FOMO because they think, well, this follower, that this influencer or this content creator or whatever that I follow has said that this is their relationship with the deity. Well, mine doesn't look like that. So am I not valid? Is that not how it is supposed to be? And I think you get into this rat race of exaggerating certain things. It's misleading. Sometimes it's fun trends. Like I remember, and this was discussed already in like 2 years ago at this point, I think. But I remember on TikTok, this was a thing where people made skits. And some people were very clear that it is a skit, but a lot of people kind of, you know, trickled down, and a lot of people started doing these things that you were like, is this a skit or not? Of spirit encounters, of Loki popping up in their living room. You had a lot of people genuinely being concerned why their relationship with whatever gods, whatever spirits, is not looking like that. You know, if something wrong with me, am I not a real witch because this spirit hasn't like made themselves like physical in my living room? That again was addressed, luckily, and I don't see that as much anymore. But you do still have that to a certain degree and to like different levels, where people make their spells out to be this thing that it really isn't, or they, you know, it's just this, it's just spreading misinformation. It's doing a disservice to the community because you are creating unrealistic expectations for people that they're going to be dissuaded or also kind of play part in this, like, yes, I totally also see the spirit or hear the spirit. And it's like, this kind of then lends itself very easily into this fearful narrative. I've seen this especially with, I'm just giving you arbitrary examples. Tarot readers that will talk to you as the audience and tell you that everyone else around you is the problem and you specifically are the victim of a situation, or you need to be fearful because, you know, everyone's sending you evil eye, or, you know, like you're the chosen one. And 40,000 people suddenly are the chosen one and everyone else is the narcissist. And it's like, it's this kind of capitalizing once again out of like easy clickbaity sort of like, that's what works well on Instagram. That's what, you know, does well on Instagram. But people start believing it. People are a little bit in that echo chamber that they don't take a step back and say, hey, hold on a second. Like this person talking about Capricorn, Scorpio, and Cancer are going to be receiving evil eye in the next month. It's like, well, that's a hell of a lot of people. It's like, that's 1 billion people right there, you know? Like, hold on a minute. But it's so easy to almost create hysteria and almost kind of then profit off of that. And sometimes I wonder if it is on purpose or if it's like kind of unconscious, but perhaps this is a little bit of a call out to take a step back and have a look at, hey, hold on a second. Are the people that I'm following, are they grifters? Hold on a second. Are the people that I'm following, are they using the most vague terminology in history? Are they calling it, oh, in folklore, you know? And it's like, hold on, which folklore though? Hold on, what's the source for that though? You know, like, hold on a second. Where are you getting this information from? And I understand that, you know, to a degree, always focusing solely on sources is also not, you know, realistic necessarily. However, I think we need to have a little bit more discernment with community authorities. You know, it's very easy to grow on Instagram and then call yourself an authority due to a large following. I think the biggest thing that irritates me This is turning into a little bit of a vent session, but you know what, so be it. Is this trend, is this sort of like, you can see these people pop up, they blow up, and then it doesn't work out for them anymore, and then they move on to the next topic. And they use it for growing, they use it for selling their, you know, whatever, and then the trend kind of simmers down and it kind of dies down a little bit, and then they move on to the next thing. And now, mind you, that has always happened and it will continue to happen. The problem is it becomes so exploitative. People take such advantage, again, consciously or unconsciously. But I beg of you, if you see a cauldron being sold for more than, I don't know, 40 euros, and it's a little copper cauldron, please pay attention. If you see a candle that's being sold for 40 euros, please pay attention. Like, I understand supporting your favorites, but there comes a point when they are taking advantage of you and they are just there to sell you stuff. And then when homesteading becomes the next new trend, they'll move on to homesteading. You know, like, there's just certain things, there's a pattern evolving. And you need to be really, really careful with that on social media nowadays, and it's such a shame that you have to be careful about it, because that shouldn't be the case. I think a big problem with all of this then falls into, okay, you've got imposter syndrome developing, you've got FOMO developing, and you have potential resentment towards your own craft resenting. Like, even if you are a creator and if you are like a genuine practitioner, you start having resentment, especially if you do see other people that you kind of perhaps look up to because they look like such an authority. If they're talking about spiritual encounters that they're having and you're not having them, and you're in that echo chamber and you keep hearing it and you keep seeing it, you're gonna start potentially feeling, again, that imposter syndrome, but also like resentment towards your own craft, where it's like, well, why am I not having these experiences? You know, like, why am I not having all these signs? Why am I not having all these things happening? You get into that really negative mindset, and it becomes paralyzing, to be honest with you. I think, you know, there comes a time when not only does that become paralyzing, but this constant need for creating and constant need for staying relevant within the algorithm, it becomes so paralyzing that you also become stuck in this silly little rat race. Like, for recipients, for consumers, it's becoming paralyzing because it's like, oh, I need to own XYZ to be a witch. Oh, I need to own, you know, all of these things. I need my altar to look a certain way. I need to be, you know, I need to constantly be out in the forest, whatever may have you, to be a proper witch. My craft doesn't look like this. This is too advanced for me, or I cannot dedicate as much time as these content creators apparently do to their craft. So much content is on dispelling misinformation, and that's paralyzing. Like, what if I'm doing it all wrong? You have a lot of these type of problems showing up with this type of content. For creators, you've got, what do you post when there's more educational people also posting? I know that's what I've kind of felt sometimes, you know. There's a lack of inspiration naturally for various reasons, but there's a pressure to perform, you know, a pressure to maintain a good position in the algorithm with other people, not wanting to disappoint, especially if you do have paying customers or supporters in any way. Some creators earn at least enough to partially support themselves. Not posting is like missing work, so some people can literally not take time off, right? Like, there's creators that they do YouTube as, like, for example, as like full-time work or Patreon or whatever have you. And it's like, you can't just, if you had like an office job, you couldn't just not post, not go to work for a week or two. And that becomes paralyzing, and you've got burnout and all that sort of stuff happening. And you have this expectation to perform, and if the algorithm, you know, if you don't post in a certain way, then again your views dip or whatever. it can be really, really scary for some creators. You've got, I've written this one down, altars are turned into filming sets. And I think that one is so, I feel like I've seen that too, where people will bring kitchen equipment into their altars. And it's like, it's sad, you know, in my opinion, at least. I think it's quite sad that this is kind of what it's come to. This is kind of what you start seeing on Instagram or on YouTube now. Or, you know, I'm gonna just read a couple of the notes here that I have as well with the algorithm or consumers. It's so funny when people are always blaming the algorithm, because it's like, yes, of course. However, well, the algorithm are the consumers to a large part too. But anyway, the algorithm/consumers, they prefer lighter and more beginner-friendly content. Sharing advanced practice means less views. Sharing advanced content, there's community guidelines. Like, I'm not gonna be able to share with you, like, I posted, for example, the chicken feet. I was like, ooh, I think that should be fine, right? Like, you've got that kind of stuff going on where it's like, well, I can't show you working with blood. I can't show you that I'm using chicken hearts or whatever have you. Like, there is a certain level of like community guidelines that you have to adhere to. Sharing advanced content also is seen as gatekeeping apparently these days, where you actually, for example, my video that I was talking about earlier is like, okay, this is advanced content, maybe, perhaps, whatever you want to call advanced, right? But you've got this information, you're posting it because perhaps you want to share something that is a little bit deeper in your practice or whatever, and then that is seen as gatekeeping, or people are like, well, that's gatekeeping because it's not accessible, or that is gatekeeping because, you know, it's not for like beginners. I don't have access to doing that at the moment, or I'm gatekeeping because I say that witchcraft isn't for everyone. And it's like, gatekeeping is the most natural part of a community. I find it so ironic that we've kind of associated gatekeeping with like this negative connotation, and it's not. Gatekeeping is the most, every community, every niche, every, you know, everything has levels of gatekeeping. At what point did we declare gatekeeping as a negative thing? Sometimes it's too controversial, or it gets backlash. For example, I got backlash saying talking about the devil in the craft, and you still got that very strong sort of sentiment coming out of the 90s and 2000s books, especially, where it's like, oh, there's no devil in the craft, and it's like, that's just not true. That's just not historically true. Of course there is the devil in the craft. Like, the folkloric devil is so prevalent. Most of, you know, this is a completely different topic, but like certain things like that, right? They get a lot of backlash, and, you know, I have to actively remind myself, it's okay. It's okay. You know, like, we're so focused, especially I think because of that authority, you know, followers equal authority. I know I have been in that loop, and I've kind of, in the past year or so, I want to say, torn myself away from that, where it's like, it's okay to lose followers. I don't care anymore. You know, it's kind of like cutting back the hedges. Like, you're gonna cut off the excess, and then it can thrive again. And I feel like that's the truth here too, but it can be very daunting. It can be daunting to receive nothing but bad or negative feedback, or mean comments, or you're losing a ton of, you know, followers. Or what is also really, really daunting is when you actually want to talk about a topic, but it is too controversial, where you're worried that your community members, you know, the other creators, for example, are going to deem you as what have you, you know, and then you're gonna be snubbed, you're gonna be isolated in a community. No one wants that. Like, it's against human nature. We, you know, humans need community, and being cut out of a community is scary. It's, you know, you've got that fear of saying something wrong, or saying something that is potentially even offending in a way. You know, I'm obviously not, again, nuance. I'm obviously not talking about like genuinely offensive things, but I'm talking about, for example, I'm using that example again of me saying witchcraft isn't for everyone. People were so offended. Well, you know, and quite frankly, so be it. If that is offending to you, like, you know, I guess it is then. It's just irritating that you have to hold yourself hostage by the algorithm or by followers or by expectations, and it creates this kind of conformity and authenticity within, you know, context of like, okay, you're not going to post an actual spell, but you're going to still be truthful about what you do believe in or what you do practice, at least in the written format. It needs to come back, in my opinion. You know, you need to be able to talk about it within the witchcraft community. You need to be able to talk about these things honestly, without having to worry that, you know, like, I don't know. Do you see what I'm saying? And then you've got kind of the other side of the coin, where if someone is called out, sometimes it's brushed under the rug, it's made to seem invalid for various reasons, where it's interesting because you kind of go back and forth between if someone is called out for example, making a misinformed post, well, that's my personal practice. And it's like, well, you know, like, we need to be able to be like, okay, are we looking at historical sourcing? Are we looking at, like, what are we doing here? Because if a post is misinformation, it doesn't matter if it is your personal personal practice, because if it is misinformation, it is misinformation. Sometimes it's turned around. For example, you know, I once made a comment on Shein, and this seems a little bit out of the witchcraft realm. No, not to me, because I feel like if you are a witch, you should care about the environment and you should care about people being paid properly, and it not being plastic. And you know, I'm inherently also incredibly animistic, and also I see myself as a pagan. I see myself as, like, you know, very, very closely connected to nature. So therefore, I made a comment about Shein and how horrible it is to be buying from them. And then people kind of turn it around and they're like, oh, this is shaming, or this is classism, or this is like some type of privilege. And it's like, they turn it around. They turn around something in their own favor because they do not want to sit with the discomfort of being held accountable. And so you've got, again, that loop where you can't hold anyone accountable in the community anymore, because everyone's just going to, like, wave it off or say that you're the problem, or say that you're, you know, like, spin the narrative, essentially. With all that being said, with all this long ass rant, content creators do create free content a lot of times. Should you be compensated for that? Yes. However, I think there should be a layer, or not a layer, there should obviously be a level of, like, does this make sense? You know, is this fair? It's a little bit about, where is it coming from? Are you expecting compensation and that's kind of what you're going in for? Are you going into this with, oh, well, you know, this is a beautiful niche, and so I'm going to make this, I'm going to capitalize off of this hobby, because that's what it is to you. It's not actually a deep practice, it's a hobby for you, and so therefore you're going to make a quick buck. Is it that? Is it because you see, you know, oh, this is like the most profitable thing ever? There was, for example, a company that does, like, tours and, like, retreats. And I find this really interesting because there are some that I see in the community that sound amazing. And I'm like, yes, that looks cool. That looks really, really well put together. That's, you know, those are people that know their shit. Those are people that are putting their heart and, you know, they're putting everything into this. And it's actually supposed to serve the community and not themselves and their wallet. And then there's people that I've seen, they also make these trips, regardless if it goes anywhere or not, And you can just tell from like the itinerary, or from, you can just tell the intention isn't there. You can tell it's not actually their heart. It's not a need for community. It's not a need for coming together and sharing this very special, you know, part of ourselves. Like your spiritual or religious beliefs are so personal, are so deeply anchored in our like souls, right? That you want to share that with someone. That is beautiful. And then you've got people that just want to make a quick buck. And then they shine a bad light on everyone. So that is my rant, because that's what it is, let's be real. And I want to talk about quickly like hypocrisy, because I know that to a certain degree, you know, most people have a level of hypocrisy, like most people, you know. I once had a person say this really cool sentence, and I love using it. You're talking a big game, but I don't see you balling like that. Where I think sometimes, like for example myself, venting and ranting over here doesn't mean that I'm absolved from any of these things. I'm sure I have made my fair share of things that are, you know, within this category as well. That's not the point of this. The point of this is supposed to kind of hold people, ourselves, and everyone accountable. Also people potentially reflect. So this here, for example, also was a reflection for me. When Joanna posted, for example, the kind of thought piece on her Instagram story, that was very reflective for me. I was like, that's such a good post. And it made me reflect. And so hopefully this is kind of what this is here for you too. I'm gonna quickly go through a couple of these questions, these prompts. And you can find these in the description box if you want to do the tag as well, if you want to take a good little rant, if you want to talk about the problems of the community that you see, and then potential solutions. Please go ahead. So for example, the first one here is the impact on community. What is my personal reasoning / inspiration behind sharing my practice online? Now, for me, when I started, and that was 7 or 8 years ago, my reasoning for it was there wasn't that many creators back then online that I felt I could connect with, that I felt I was like, oh yeah, I see myself in you, you know, that I felt like we're, what's the word I'm looking for? Relatable, that's the word. And so I was like, okay, well, I think it would be fun to, you know, step in and try this out for myself. I also was really young. I think I was like 18 when I started. 18, 19? I think maybe 19. So I didn't have a lot of thought process going into this, to be very frank with you. As for nowadays, what's my reason for continuing? Well, I genuinely enjoy I see myself as a little bit of a photographer / artist as well. And so for me, it's both sharing my passion and having a space to share that passion, but also I love I love the community. I love the people that I have met. I've loved, you know, the fact that I've built genuine, real solid relationships and friendships with people that are across the world that I can talk about these things with, that in my nearest environment here, you know, living in like wherever, that I'm able to have these relationships, that I'm able to go have these back and forths with people. I also personally am a consumer. I consume content too. I consume, you know, what they're putting out and what education they're putting out there as well. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from. How do I believe social media as a whole has impacted the community? I find this one an interesting one. I think it's a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, I do think that it has a lot, I'm kind of like just sinking lower and lower. I do think it has offered a lot to individuals who, for example, wanted to connect, or who, you know, had that sort of same thought process as myself. However, I do think that it's watered down witchcraft. I think it's kind of whitewashed it. I think that people are a lot of times really fake. They profit off of it. They don't actually believe in what they're talking about. It's just kind of a trend they hopped on. And it has brought a lot of people to witchcraft. And I think the thing with it is, when something becomes popular and when something becomes more not generic, but when it becomes more like more people are joining, right? Obviously, it's cool that more people are there now. However, the more people are in something, the more likely you are to have misinformation, the more likely you are to have all of these problems arise, right? Of this entire video. So that's my kind of point of view here. How do I decipher what is appropriate to share online versus what to keep privately? Is this based on social media etiquette or personal preference? For me, depending on what it is, obviously. I don't share, I have very strict rules. I have a little bit of a moral code for myself. I don't share active workings, rituals, spirit workings, or anything like that. I will never, ever, 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 ever post anything out of my grimoire unless it's like just a pretty page, but it doesn't actually hold personal sort of like, you know, thought pieces or workings or anything like that. So that's already one. Obviously there's community guidelines. And then I also want to keep in mind that Instagram is pretty open with age. My Patreon, for example, is age restricted. That's 18 plus. So you're gonna have a little bit more in-depth type of stuff there where, you know, I'm assuming you're an adult, that kind of a thing. But on Instagram, I'm probably not going to be talking about blood magic, for example, right? Where I'm like, oh, well, this is how I, you know, do that, because there's people that are under the age of 18 and I don't think that's appropriate. Same with like sex magic, that sort of stuff, right? So I think common sense is my guideline for most of it. And then in terms of, for example, posting my altar, this is an entire topic in itself. If there's not an active working on it, I don't mind posting it. I will say I like to ask my spirits, for example, if they feel comfortable with me posting certain angles or not. And that's kind of where I take some of that as well. Have you ever heard of or encountered grifters in your community? And how do I recognize them? What are significant signs of grifters in the community? I find this one fascinating. Because yes, absolutely. There's absolutely been grifters and they annoy me so much. And especially because they do oftentimes have large followings and you can't even really call them out. And so all you can do is a shady little subtweet. But, which by the way, on the one hand, and this is where I'm hypocritical, on the one hand, I'm always like, we should be able to communicate openly, and if there's an issue, just text me. However, I know that I probably don't have the balls to actually confront someone and call them out, let's say, unless it is, you know, like a severe case and I'm not personally involved with that person in any case anyway. But for the most part, there's a sense of like this is a workspace and we're all colleagues, and calling a colleague out like that comes with a lot of consequences, especially if they have friends. And then if you call that one person out, that entire group of friends is gonna band against you and, you know, try to ruin your career, so to say. So it's a little bit tricky sometimes. It's a really sensitive topic to navigate. But yes, I think there are grifters in the community. My first warning sign is if they hop from trend to trend. I think another big one is if what they're selling is absolutely just not fair. So there's a difference between obviously like people selling very, very handmade products and I feel like there's a level of like just feeling, like intuition goes into it too. But I think there is a difference between someone selling a course or selling a retreat or selling a product. And you know that person has, first of all, you follow that person for a long time and you have seen their track record of, yes, they know what they're doing, because I was able to verify that information for myself with various sources. And I know that this person has been doing this for a reasonable amount of time themselves and is now in a position where what they share is not extending their own level of knowledge, and what they are able to share is in fact helpful and knowledgeable. I think that's a big one. Like I've seen some creators do the most amazing courses that if I had the money, I would love to partake in, you know, but I think there comes a little bit of common sense into it too, where some other people I've seen, they take up a topic and then they immediately jump to selling it. And it's like, well, you're still practicing. Like I remember it was especially on TikTok, everyone started doing tarot readings, you know, and it's like, you literally have a video a month ago where you're like, this is my first tarot deck. It's like, hold on a second, you know? So that's a little bit of a thing. The prices themselves, is it justifiable to charge 40 euros for a candle? Or, you know, like you're doing a spell jar that easily could be done yourself. As a matter of fact, I think probably is more beneficial to do yourself. That's another one. I think there comes a point in people's practice where I understand selling certain products that are very specialized, that are beautifully handcrafted, where I'm like, I couldn't possibly do this myself. And I would want a professional to do it. And then there comes those moments where it's like, okay, well, you're putting together lavender, chamomile, bath salts, and you're selling it for $20. And it's like, it'd be so much more powerful for you yourself to make that type of thing. You don't need to, like, you're not supporting your, you know, favorite. You're putting money in their pocket. That's just like them taking advantage of the situation, you know, that's them taking advantage of the fact that they know that they have people that look up to them, that see them as an authority, and then they just sell you everything and they sell you anything. And I find that is a big sign. And then personally, I've also kind of, and this is a little difficult to discern, I've come to the conclusion that a couple of people for sure that are big creators, they don't believe in what they're actually saying and selling and posting, mostly due to having a personal conversation with them, and realizing and coming to that conclusion over a certain amount of time, where it's like, hold on a second, you know, like you have these like little red flags along the way and you're like, hold on a second, hold on, you know? Honestly, it's really hard, and perhaps Joanna or Leah are gonna have a better conclusion as to how I identify a grifter. I feel like I'm just word vomiting over here. How does a large following impact the perception of the creator? Does this immediately make them an expert, or are there other assumptions as to why they may have a large following? Again, to me, in my opinion, I think large followings don't show expertise, they don't show knowledge, they don't show how reliable that person is or should make them an authority. A large following is mostly due to the fact that they understand how social media works. In the case of YouTube and Instagram, if it is filmed with a good quality camera, and you consistently post 2-3 times a week, and it is a beautiful video, so for example the lighting is really nice and your setup is really nice, you're gonna grow a following. That's just how it works. If you post for at least a month in that way, you're going to get a following, and then, you know, give it a year and you'll have 50,000 followers, or 100,000 followers or whatever. That does not make them an authority, in my opinion whatsoever. But of course it looks good. You know, you're more likely to be noticed. You're more likely like to be seen. People are more likely to take note. That even includes TV like stations or publishers. They're more likely to reach out to you with a larger following. As a matter of fact, you're more likely to receive a larger sum of money if you're a larger follower, right? So it's all about views. It's all about like how many people can I reach in the perception of a company. So let's take some made-up company, they want to reach out to an influencer. They're gonna say, okay, well, this person has 100,000 followers, this person has 2,000 followers. They're not gonna give the 100,000 followers person the same amount of money that they would to a 2,000 follower person, which is like, yeah, duh, obviously. However, it kind of goes into that idea of like, well, you know, just because of like that large following and because they were consistent or got lucky or whatever, it creates that perception of, well, this person obviously knows what they're talking about. There's no way that 100,000 people would follow this person if they didn't know what they were talking about, right? And then I think people oftentimes forget that it's such, there's always going to be new beginners. That's the nature of things. It's, you know, you're going to have a turnaround of more people following you with time. I don't think that should be a qualifying factor for being an authority or not, at all. Interestingly enough, my personal perspective on it is I am almost ashamed to a certain degree of having a large following when I want to interact with people that I look up to. There's a couple of authors that, for example, I look up to. I've read, you know, every single one of their books. And I adore their writing, and their content, or within the books, for example, is so qualitatively good. But I'm like, when I do those, you know, I've done videos where it's like, well, these are book recommendations, right? I am almost fearful of tagging that author because I'm like, are they going to look at my account and think that I'm a willy-nilly content creator that is just fluff and, you know, it's just pretty stuff, but there's no depth to it. And so sometimes having a large following, sometimes I feel like it can bite you in the butt too. At least in my personal experience. But yeah, so I think that is going to be it for this video. It's probably an hour long at this point. In any case, again, I hope that this kind of starts a little bit of a conversation. Perhaps you completely disagree with me, which is absolutely okie dokie as well. I again want you to know that I'm not coming here making like statements and being like, I am the president of the witchcraft community, I am the witch police. Obviously not. And again, I have made my fair share of all of the aforementioned, well, not all. I wouldn't call myself a grifter. But I've made my fair share of posts that are very watered down or fluffy because they are, you know, good for the aesthetic. And I was, you know, perhaps too focused on like views, or I deleted a video even though it was qualitatively good, but it didn't receive the quantity of views that I wanted. You know, so again, take even everything in this video with a grain of salt, please. I think if the message here is anything, then it is to be more precautious, and discernment is needed, and just be aware that just because someone is a content creator, it does not make them an authority. It just means that they have a good camera and consistently post it. And I think that's another thing. I think it's really frustrating how you can essentially buy your way into being an authority at this point. Like if you have the money to make yourself a nice altar setup and you've got money for a nice camera, boom, boom, there you go. But I digress. Again, all of the questions are going to be, I think what might have happened, I think that was what we were talking about, is it's going to be in the description box. I think it's going to be a public Patreon post because the description box has like a word limit. So it's going to be a public Patreon post that anyone can access. You don't have to be a Patreon for this. It's just the easiest platform to post all of these questions so that everyone can have a look at them, and that will be linked. And then as per usual, all of my socials are linked. And of course, please, the comments are open for absolutely everyone, and just with kindness, feel free to give feedback, criticize, talk about your own experiences. I would love to hear. And with that being said, I'm tagging absolutely everyone. Please make a video of your own experiences. And yeah, well, thank you everyone for being here. I hope you had a good time. The sun literally went down at the time that I filmed this. Yeah, may you walk with your gods. Bye.